Congressional record published Saturday, June 28, 2025. In the Senate today, no recorded proceedings took place. Turning to the House of Representatives, the day began with a prayer by Dr. Gary G. Dull of Faith Baptist Church in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Dr. Dull prayed for guidance and unity among members and for America to remain a beacon of peace and freedom worldwide. The Speaker approved the previous day's journal and led the House in the Pledge of Allegiance, recited by Ms. Dean, a Democrat from Pennsylvania. Mr. Joyce, a Republican from Pennsylvania, introduced Pastor Gary Dull, who opened the session with prayer. Pastor Dull has preached since age 12 and leads Faith Baptist Church. He founded Way of Truth Ministries supporting missionaries globally. The Speaker pro tempore, Mr. Moore of North Carolina, allowed up to 5 additional 1-minute speeches per side. Mr. Thompson, a Republican from Pennsylvania, recognized National Homeownership Month. He called homeownership a cornerstone of the American dream, but noted challenges like rising interest rates and limited housing supply. He urged bipartisan efforts to expand affordable housing and reduce regulatory costs. Ms. Dean, Democrat of Pennsylvania, expressed concern over recent U.S. airstrikes in Iran and criticized what she called chaotic decision-making by the Trump White House. She said members hope for briefings on these military actions soon. Representative Davis, a Democrat from North Carolina, honored William Horn, known as Bus Dad, who retired after 51 years driving a school bus for Wilson County Public Schools. Mr. Davis praised his dedication to transporting exceptional children safely. Representative Correa, a Democrat from California, spoke about immigration enforcement in his district. He shared the story of Narciso Barranco, detained by ICE despite no criminal record and having 3 sons in the U.S. Marine Corps. Mr. Correa called for reform and urged focus on criminals rather than law-abiding residents. Representative Magaziner, a Democrat from Rhode Island, urged restoration of funding for life-saving food aid worldwide. He criticized cuts that endanger children suffering from malnutrition and pledged daily advocacy until funding is restored. The House considered a resolution condemning violent riots in Los Angeles following federal immigration enforcement actions by ICE. Representative Keeley, a Republican from California, introduced House Resolution 516 condemning arson, looting, assaults on law enforcement, and use of fireworks and Molotov cocktails against officers. The resolution criticized California Governor Gavin Newsom for refusing assistance to local law enforcement amid worsening violence. Over 561 rioters were arrested and 12 LAPD officers injured. A statement expressed gratitude to the military for precise execution amid concerns about Trump administration decisions. It raised issues like hostages, Ukraine, cuts to federal institutions including USAID and NIH, and Medicaid reductions affecting millions. The Trump White House was accused of using distractions to obscure these impacts. The resolution highlighted failures by California leadership to contain unrest and support overwhelmed law enforcement. It recognized law enforcement agencies including LAPD, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, California Highway Patrol, Orange County Sheriff's Department, and ICE for their efforts to maintain safety. The Small Business Administration urged Governor Newsom to request an economic injury disaster loan declaration to assist small businesses looted during the riots. The Los Angeles Ambulatory Care Center closed for several days due to unrest, canceling over 700 appointments. HUD's Los Angeles field office also temporarily closed amid violence linked to anti-ICE protests. The resolution condemned violence against law enforcement and illegal aliens who perpetrated such violence. It affirmed the right to peaceful protest but unequivocally condemned violence against federal, state, and local officers. Mr. Keeley requested unanimous consent for members to revise and extend remarks on House Resolution 516. There was no objection. He described violent scenes in Los Angeles during protests against ICE operations and condemned politicians who failed to address the violence properly. He defended ICE's standard operations, targeting individuals with criminal records, and criticized sanctuary policies preventing custody transfers. Ms. Lofgren, a Democrat from California and chair of the California Democratic delegation, opposed the resolution as partisan and misleading. She described ICE operations as aggressive actions against ordinary people and noted peaceful protests protected by the First Amendment. She condemned violent individuals who infiltrated protests but criticized language accusing California leaders unfairly. The debate revealed deep divisions over immigration enforcement and responses to civil unrest in Los Angeles. A California Democrat challenged the resolution's portrayal of events as widespread chaos. She noted that protests were largely confined downtown and that local law enforcement had control before federal troops arrived. She criticized President Trump for deploying Marines and National Guard without local requests, calling it unprecedented and unnecessary. A California Republican disagreed with claims that LAPD controlled the situation fully and defended President Trump's authority to act based on court rulings. He criticized sanctuary policies and defunding police promoted by Democrats. Mrs. Kim, a Republican from California, supported House Resolution 516 condemning violent riots while recognizing the right to peaceful protest. She thanked law enforcement officers for their service and called on leaders to cooperate with federal authorities to restore peace. Representative Corey spoke again about immigration raids in Santa Ana, targeting hardworking residents without criminal records. He criticized President Trump's administration for breaking up military families through these actions. Representative Raskin, a Democrat from Maryland, questioned the value of the resolution before the House. He criticized it as partisan and noted that a prior resolution honoring Capitol Police officers from January 6 has not been fulfilled. The House debated immigration enforcement tactics and troop deployments amid protests. A California Democrat described ICE raids involving masked agents detaining people indiscriminately, including U.S. citizens without criminal records. She defended peaceful protests as patriotic and criticized troop deployments as escalating tensions. A California Republican defended President Trump's deployment of National Guard troops, citing violent acts before their arrival and court rulings upholding presidential authority. Representative Raskin raised concerns about conflicting reports on enforcement priorities, causing fear among farm workers. Representative Berrigan, a Democrat from California, argued local law enforcement controlled situations before federal troops arrived, and criticized the resolution for justifying troop deployments without local consent. The House voted on a resolution condemning violence related to immigration enforcement and law enforcement policies. Representative Keeley emphasized that political differences should be resolved through debate, not violence or force. The resolution passed with 215 yea votes to 195 nays after a recorded vote requested by Representative Raskin. Several members honored individuals today, including Lieutenant Colonel Boyd Mason of Mississippi for military service, the Hillsborough High School Lady Indian softball team for athletic achievements, Sister Rosemary Connolly of Chicago for decades of service, Stephen Chaos Camus, remembered for advocacy on mental health, and others recognized for community contributions. Representative Salinas, a Democrat from Texas, spoke in support of LGBTQ youth during Pride Month and criticized President Trump's shutdown of the 988 LGBTQ youth hotline amid alarming suicide statistics. Representative LaHood, a Republican from Illinois, honored Sister Rosemary Connolly's legacy in caring for people with developmental disabilities. Representative Balint, a Democrat from New York, criticized the so-called Big Beautiful Bill supported by Republicans as unpopular with Americans due to cuts in health care and food assistance. Representative Crawford celebrated Officer John Salb's retirement after over 30 years with Capitol Police. Representative Ruiz honored Stephen Camus' memory and called for better mental health care access. Representative McKenzie spoke about victims of a terrorist attack in Syria and prayed for peace. Representative McLean Delaney highlighted progress on rural broadband access as key to opportunity in the 21st century. Representative Owens praised youth development programs at the Midvale Boys and Girls Club in Utah. Representative Capter honored community leader Diana D. Haywood Talmadge's legacy in Ohio. Representative Rose praised a Supreme Court ruling limiting nationwide injunctions by district courts as a victory for democracy. Ms. Simon remembered musician Dwayne Wiggins during Black Music Month's close. Mrs. Sykes recognized Fairlawn Police Department officers for saving a woman's life in Ohio. Mr. Vasey honored educator Sally Ruth Moore's lifetime service in Texas education. Mr. Green celebrated LGBTQIA+ Pride Month despite political challenges. Representative Thanadar honored immigrants' contributions and introduced a censure resolution against Representative Andy Ogles for racist remarks. Representative Chip Roy discussed tax cuts and spending legislation aimed at reducing deficits while funding border security under President Trump's agenda. A member criticized Senate efforts weakening budget reforms included in the House bill that aimed to reduce deficits through Medicaid reform and ending certain subsidies known as the Green New Scam. The Speaker emphasized fiscal responsibility amid rising national debt now at $37 trillion, and warned against passing bills increasing deficits without reforms. The average age of American homeowners has risen by about 10 years due to economic challenges affecting younger generations' ability to buy homes. The speaker shared personal experiences denying funding requests due to debt concerns and called for honest votes requiring tax increases when new programs are created. Congress faces pressure to pass budget bills before July 4 but must avoid default or tax hikes, while addressing border funding responsibly, without increasing debt or removing reforms. The House adjourned after remarks emphasizing fiscal discipline, Medicaid reform, ending subsidies benefiting China under green energy programs, stopping fraud in food stamps, taxing remittances sent abroad by undocumented immigrants, and opposing taxpayer-funded sex change operations included in Senate bills. Executive communications included regulatory updates from Treasury's Office of Comptroller of Currency on bank mergers, SEC on swap reporting, EPA on airplan approvals, Department of Transportation on nominations, Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board on retirement fund corrections, HUD on civil monetary penalties, Amtrak's fiscal year 2026 grant request, IRS on digital asset reporting, and HHS Inspector General report on Part D drug coverage for dual-eligible enrollees. Several bills were introduced, including measures requiring EPA guidance with air quality standards, expediting export license decisions, reviewing defense articles sales, medical waste treatment at VA facilities, invasive species strike teams, firearms regulations addressing domestic terrorism, safe storage laws, background check improvements, penalties for nonprofit misconduct, defense trade cooperation among allies, prohibiting parole for dangerous aliens, clarifying Holocaust art recovery laws, improving classified information eligibility processes, disaster loan program accountability, rural weather monitoring studies, telecommunications equipment reporting, repealing sanctions on Syria, modernizing firearms laws, expanding health savings account uses, prohibiting Medicaid payments for conversion therapy, protecting LGBTQI rights globally, amending air service applications, asbestos hazard disclosures in housing sales, tax benefits for school resource officers, censuring Representative Ogles, supporting President Trump's Iran policy, commemorating Cancer Awareness Days, impeaching a federal judge, honoring Frederick W. Smith's legacy, remembering Highland Park shooting victims, promoting peace in Congo, commemorating Marshall Space Flight Center anniversary, urging investigation into activist death in India, among others. In the Senate today, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa opposed President Biden's executive order mandating project labor agreements on federal contracts over $35 million. He argued these agreements unfairly favor unionized contractors and exclude many small businesses in right-to-work states like Iowa. Grassley called for revoking this order to ensure fair competition based on merit. Senator John Thune of South Dakota highlighted priorities under President Donald Trump's administration, including making permanent the 2017 tax cuts that benefit families across income levels. His bill would raise child tax credits permanently, maintain higher standard deductions, protect family farms from estate taxes, support agriculture through increased commodity prices and crop insurance improvements, enhance border security funding including completing the border wall, invest in military readiness with shipbuilding and missile defense systems like Golden Dome, promote domestic energy production for energy independence, and enact historic spending cuts projected to reduce deficits by up to $6 trillion through economic growth rather than tax increases. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois opened Senate proceedings with reflections on storytelling as a tool to represent vulnerable voices lacking powerful advocates in Washington. Senate Majority Leader praised longtime speechwriter Molly Rowley, retiring after over 20 years, shaping leaders' messages with creativity rooted in social justice values and storytelling that connects policy to everyday lives. Senator Durbin also honored Chicago police officer Crystal Rivera, who was killed in the line of duty on June 5 at age 36. He shared heartfelt stories highlighting her protective spirit and community dedication while offering condolences to her family. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming addressed threats from Iran, including recent airstrikes targeting Iranian nuclear facilities under President Trump's direction. He warned about Iranian sleeper cells inside the U.S., criticized prior administration policies allowing Iranian immigrants unchecked entry at the southern border, contrasted this with Trump's record reducing illegal crossings by 95%, noted recent ICE arrests of Iranian nationals with criminal convictions, and called for increased border security funding, totaling $160 billion, including hiring thousands more agents and completing the border wall. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized President Trump's so-called beautiful bill as harmful legislation cutting healthcare coverage for millions, while rewarding billionaires with tax breaks. He urged Republicans not to rush passage before proper scrutiny or meet artificial deadlines like July 4th. Senator John Barrasso praised President Trump's successful military strike on Iranian nuclear sites that caused no American casualties, while sending a strong message to adversaries including Russia and China. He opposed Democratic resolutions challenging presidential authority, citing prior bipartisan support for similar actions under past administrations. Senator Tim Kaine moved to discharge a resolution directing removal of U.S. forces from unauthorized hostilities against Iran, asserting Congress' constitutional war powers authority ahead of an expected vote later today. Senator Kaine shared personal experiences as Virginia governor overseeing National Guard deployments during 2 decades of war, emphasizing heavy costs borne by military families and communities affected by conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. He stressed that war decisions require congressional debate, not unilateral presidential action, citing lessons learned from misleading intelligence used to justify Iraq war in 2003. Other senators echoed constitutional principles that only Congress can declare war, while presidents may act defensively against imminent threats but must seek authorization otherwise. Concerns were raised about President Trump posting inappropriate videos glorifying bombing Iran and excluding Democratic leaders from national security briefings, raising fears of partisan war-making decisions without full congressional oversight. Debate included calls for renewed diplomacy with Iran, referencing prior successful nuclear agreements under President Obama that prevented weapon development through inspections despite opposition from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who influenced President Trump toward military action instead of negotiation. Senators highlighted risks of escalating conflict given ongoing missile strikes between Israel and Iran, following recent attacks disrupting diplomatic talks scheduled just days prior. Senator Marsha Blackburn strongly supported President Trump's targeted strike, calling it decisive action ending hostilities rather than starting war, while warning that restricting presidential authority could embolden adversaries, leading to endless conflict. Senator Jerry Moran emphasized constitutional balance between Congress declaring war and President commanding forces defending national security, but opposed resolutions limiting presidential flexibility during crises like recent Iran strikes. Senator Bernie Sanders urged focus on domestic crises such as healthcare affordability, housing shortages, childhood poverty, childcare access, student debt relief, climate change mitigation, rather than engaging in costly wars with Iran or elsewhere, citing historical mistakes like Vietnam and Iraq wars, based on false premises, leading to tragic loss of life and resources. Senator Lindsey Graham warned that requiring congressional approval before military action would be disastrous, emphasizing singular commander-in-chief authority vested in the president under the Constitution, while praising President Trump's military experience as Navy SEAL relevant to combating radical Islamic terrorism threats globally. Senator Rand Paul underscored constitutional intent, granting Congress sole power to declare war, warning against executive overreach, risking endless conflicts without legislative oversight, citing founders' warnings about executive propensity toward war-making absent checks. Senator Jeff Merkley lamented unilateral strikes ordered without congressional authorization, risking prolonged Middle East conflicts, endangering tens of thousands of U.S. troops, while advocating diplomacy addressing Iran's nuclear ambitions alongside curbing militia funding across region, ensuring lasting peace consistent with constitutional war powers framework. Senator Roger Wicker celebrated Grand Gulf Nuclear Station's 40 years, providing reliable carbon-free electricity powering over 800,000 homes in Mississippi, while supporting local economy through jobs, taxes, community engagement, safety standards, training programs, preparing future nuclear professionals. Senator Adam Schiff honored Final AIDS/Lifecycle Ride, marking decades raising funds combating HIV/AIDS, emphasizing community resilience, compassion, legacy, continuing beyond events conclusion, through ongoing health equity efforts, supporting LGBTQ+ rights nationwide. Senate received multiple communications, including FAA reports updating airspace classifications across various states, Department of Homeland Security vacancy notices, FCC regulatory fee assessments, EPA environmental rule updates including emission standards waivers, IRS notices extending digital asset reporting relief, Department of State arms export licenses involving UK, Norway, Romania, Department of Veterans Affairs data bank reporting rules. all referred appropriately to committees overseeing these matters. House messages conveyed passage requests for immigration-related bills enhancing data transparency on special interest aliens attempting unlawful entry and tightening inadmissibility criteria related to impaired driving convictions, along with resolutions authorizing use of Emancipation Hall for Congressional Gold Medal ceremonies honoring Harlem Hellfighters, among others, signed into law by Senate leadership today. Several new Senate bills introduced include measures prohibiting panic defenses based on sexual orientation or gender identity, reforming intelligence community leadership roles, disapproving EPA emissions rules affecting Indiana under cross-state pollution regulations, among others, referred to relevant committees for consideration. Senator Jeff Merkley highlighted decades-long contributors to national debt, including wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Bush-era tax cuts, and President Trump's 2017 tax legislation, warning, current votes under Republican leadership continue unsustainable borrowing, threatening future funding for healthcare, education, research, housing programs, urging fiscal responsibility now rather than passing harmful bills, cutting vital services while enriching billionaires, disproportionately increasing inequality nationwide. Discussions also covered history, principles behind Budget Control Act, establishing reconciliation process requiring deficit reduction within 10 years, relying on nonpartisan scoring agencies, ensuring transparency, accountability, while recent attempts threaten these pillars through reinterpretation, expanding deficit spending beyond original limits, risking fiscal discipline erosion, prompting calls for adherence to bipartisan budget rules, preserving Senate's 60-vote threshold integrity, preventing budget gimmicks, undermining long-term solvency efforts critical for economic. That concludes today's summary of congressional proceedings in both chambers. Thanks for listening. The full source material for this summary is in the description below.